Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us here for this important announcement. We're speaking to you today on the traditional territory of the signatories of Treaty 7, and I acknowledge the Métis people who share a deep connection to this land. I'm joined today by our leader, Rachel Notley. Today, we are very pleased to present a new proposal, a part of our project, Alberta's Future. Alberta's Future is our ongoing work to consult with Albertans on how to build the economy. We're engaging with tens of thousands of Albertans on how to create long-term, sustainable jobs in a diversified economy. Much of our history rests on the hard work of our farmers and ranchers. Agriculture is a vital piece of our identity, especially for those like me. I grew up working on my uncle's farm near Pincher Creek. Raising crop and livestock is still foundational to our economy, and the food we grow here are exported all across the world. As the critic of agriculture, forestry, and rural economic development, I'm pleased to present this proposal. Championing Alberta's agriculture and agri-food, increasing value-add processing and production. It's been a tremendous privilege for me to spend the last few years traveling to rural communities right across Alberta and hearing firsthand what agricultural producers need to meet the challenges of today and seize the opportunities of tomorrow. For those, I've had many conversations, and it's clear that ag tech and value-add industries are critical to unlocking the full potential of rural economies. What also came through loud and clear is that the government must be focused on that factor, and we must champion this factor and this sector. We can develop the innovative ideas of today's Alberta students and researchers and turn them into new industrial projects and jobs. We'd encourage the spirits of entrepreneurship right across Alberta. The food we grow here is already shipped across the world. The demand for that food is going to increase by as much as 50% in the next 25 years. The choice we make in the next few years will decide whether we are in the position to take full advantage of those global demands for our food. Despite growing demands for agriculture, the truth is that Alberta's rural communities are shrinking. But I'm confident that this trend can be reversed. It is essential that we create the conditions for world-class education, exciting careers, and good-paying industrial jobs in our rural economies. I'm very grateful to all Albertans who welcomed me to their farms, into their businesses, and even their homes to share their experience and understanding with me. My consultations have involved thousands of Albertans, and honestly, it's been a blast. I got to drive new harvesting equipment currently being developed in Lethbridge. I toured irrigation districts in the windy south. I even picked potatoes with producers in my own beautiful riding of Edmonton Manning. And I'm going to be honest, I've ruined quite a few of my boots in the process. And so I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation with Albertans today. In the coming weeks, we will announce dates for consultations on our proposal. We will take your ideas and your feedback on the proposals, and of course, we'll adjust accordingly. And to tell you more about our proposals, I'm so excited to invite Rachel Notley to speak to you.
Thank you so much, Heather. And where'd you go? There you are. There we are. Thank you so much to Heather and really to all the incredible amount of work that she has been doing over the past months to put together this proposal and indeed to consult with so many stakeholders across the province. Your work is not only appreciated by our caucus, but I've heard from so many that it's appreciated by folks within the sector itself. And you know, Heather is absolutely right. Alberta was built by the hard work of farmers and ranchers. Agriculture is a vital piece of our identity. And it's especially that for so many of us who, like me and Heather, who grew up in rural Alberta. And as she says, raising crops and livestock is foundational to our economy here in the province. And the food that we grow here is exported all over the world. In fact, the world's going to want a lot more of what we have in the coming years when it comes to our food, and that's good news. Alberta exported over $12.4 billion worth of agriculture and food products in 2020 alone. And meanwhile, the Business Council of Alberta has pointed out that the economic value of agri-food production and processing could provide, or currently provides $10 billion and could provide so much more. So, If we are prepared, the fact is this: the growth in global food demand represents billions and billions of dollars worth of new jobs and investment into rural Alberta. This is an opportunity we have to focus on seizing. Thousands of new jobs, billions of new investment in rural Alberta. So the key is laying out very clearly for investors and entrepreneurs alike, how do we do this? Now, our consultation identified a few of the major roadblocks that are currently holding back the development of value-add agriculture industries in Alberta. A lack of capacity in our regulatory agencies leaves projects waiting for years instead of months for an answer. A lack of access to capital for both industry to build facilities as well as their municipal partners to build the kind of infrastructure that would support those facilities. A lack of robust rural broadband internet is another problem. And lastly, in general, there is a need for our political leaders to champion the sector. So we only need to look to our neighbours to the east to see how important that kind of leadership can be. The governments of Saskatchewan and Manitoba are doing this work, and Alberta producers have told us that they can see that this UCP government is not. For instance, Team Alberta, a group made up of representatives from barley, beekeepers, canola, pulses, seed growers, sugar beets, wheats, and potatoes, sent a letter to Minister Horner just last month, and they said, and I quote, "Farmers in Alberta continue to see large-scale investments into agri-food processing being made into other jurisdictions across Canada. This is resulting in lost marketing opportunities, risk diversification, and reduced competitiveness for Alberta farmers, as well as diminishing jobs and other rural economic growth factors for Alberta as a whole." End quote. Here's the thing. An Alberta NDP government will not let this opportunity slip through our fingers. We will act, and we will take specific actions based on the proposals that we have heard back from producers and stakeholders that they want to see us make. And here they are. First and foremost, we will create an Alberta Value Add Incentive Program. That means financial incentives to build or expand an agricultural value-add set of facilities across the province. We'll form a task force to guide exactly what form those incentives should take, whether it's loan guarantees, grants, or tax credits. Now, we created a similar program for value add in the petrochemical industry in 2016, and that led successfully to billions and billions of new dollars in investments, new industrial projects, and thousands of new jobs in that sector. And I believe that the same kind of breakthrough is possible for agri-food and upgrading. We'll create a local fund incentive program, which is also geared towards smaller projects that serve local needs. We will also bring in more staff to the government itself to speed up the processing of agricultural and agri-food proposals. And at the same time, we'll create a navigation service to guide entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors through the various approvals from all of the relevant departments in the Government of Alberta. We won't compromise on high standards in the process, but what we will do is get proponents the answers they need quickly, efficiently, effectively to build good projects. We'll lower the cost of capital borrowing for municipalities, bringing it back down to the rate that the province gets after the UCP jacked it up. And we will ensure that provincial infrastructure priorities align with these kinds of local plans. We'll make sure that ag tech is embedded in Alberta's tech strategy. As many will know, we've already released an Alberta's Future proposal on the tech sector that calls for an Alberta Venture Fund, growing and modernizing the Alberta Enterprise Corporation, and also attracting a global accelerator. So we need to make sure that all that work that we've already outlined with respect to the tech sector is ready, particularly to receive ag tech proposals. We'll connect rural Alberta to reliable, affordable broadband internet, just as we described in another one of our Alberta's Future proposals called Bridging the Digital Divide. And lastly, we will undo the damage caused by the UCP to our post-secondary and instead strengthen our post-secondary institutions, as described in yet another one of our Alberta's Future papers, Strengthening Post-Secondary for a Resilient Future. Our agricultural and life sciences programs are world-class, and they must be accessible to Alberta students and researchers to drive the innovations of the future. So there you go. That is 8 specific actions that an NDP government will take to seize the billions upon billions of dollars worth of new investments and create good-paying industrial jobs and resilient rural economies right across Alberta. It's all here, folks, right in here. I urge you, check it out, albertasfuture.ca, and you can read about all these proposals in more detail. Now, before I wrap up, let me say one more thing. As we head towards an election, people often ask me, what's changed for you since 2015? What have you learned? And what I've often said, and what I want to repeat, is that I do think one of our bigger mistakes was that we didn't take enough time to listen and consult with families, residents, business owners across rural Alberta. So I'm determined to do a better job with the conversations that the proposals within this paper that Heather has so thoughtfully put together will generate. This work, our rural internet work, our local infrastructure work, it's based on those conversations, and it will be ongoing should we form the next government. So I'm grateful to all the Albertans who've already shared their vision and their expertise with us in the preparation of this proposal. What we heard loud and clear is that the government of Alberta must be a champion for agriculture and a champion for the innovation that that sector can drive so that it can flourish for generations to come. Rural communities need a champion, and I commit that an NDP government will be that champion. Thank you, and we're happy to take your questions.
All right, thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Heather. We'll now move to the Q&A portion. Just a reminder for those joining us on the phone to use the *9 function, and for those joining us on Zoom to use the raise hand function to get into the question queue. Once your line is unmuted, please state your name and outlet at the top. Go ahead, caller, your line is open.
I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to the cost of this. You've said that the corporate tax cut that the UCP has brought in isn't enough of an incentive to compete with this sector or some of the incentives in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. But you're proposing other incentives kind of akin to the petrochemical incentive that you brought in. But that petrochemical incentive was billions and billions of dollars. I'm wondering what's the bottom line dollar difference between an incentive program akin to that petrochemical incentive and the UCP's tax rate?
Well, first of all, let me say that the UCP tax rate is absolutely inapplicable and doesn't help entrepreneurial groups and new groups that would be setting up with respect to the kind of innovation that we're looking for in our agri-foods and agri-upgrading sector. And so we have to remember that corporate handout that the UCP brought in costs billions and billions, like $2 billion this year alone. And the petrochemical processing incentive program that you outlined doesn't cost that much, and the numbers that you're quoting are actually stretched out over about a 10-year process. So in fact, it's a much, much more effective return on investment to work collaboratively with growing and emerging industries that are part of that overall diversification plan to bring them here and then to build off of the interest in the sector that comes from attracting those first movers. So let me just sort of say that. So as you know, we don't support the UCP's annual multi-billion dollar handout to profitable large corporations because it works against the priority and the object of diversification and supporting emerging small and medium-sized enterprises. So targeted incentive programs, A, cost significantly less, and B, get much more of the kind of outcome that we're seeking. So with respect to the incentive program, we've talked about establishing a task force to design exactly the kind of incentive that would be most effective at competing with the sorts of programs that we see in Manitoba and in Saskatchewan. But absolutely, we're looking at a fraction of the cost that this government is currently throwing out the door to currently profitable corporations with really very little to show for it. And we would build it off of the kinds of costing that you're seeing in Saskatchewan, Manitoba.
Do you have a follow-up, Lisa?
Sure, thanks. I'm wondering, I mean, I've seen some recent proposals from the NDP that are not precisely costed. I'm thinking back to your hydrogen plan, which specified $350 million. The Calgary downtown plan is $155 million. I'm wondering why you're taking this approach and leaving the door open for a task force to determine the exact loan guarantees, grants, or tax credits instead of pinning down exactly what you want to do with that and how much it would cost.
I think because it is so important for us to engage with stakeholders in the industry and for us to get as much expert advice as we can take advantage of. And so that's why. I mean, when we developed the PDP program, for instance, with the support and assistance of 30,000 people in the public sector, even that took a while for us to refine the ultimate cost. It ultimately was very successful. But so we're saying that this would be modeled on that. It probably wouldn't be the same level of expense that we saw there. But we need to allow for stakeholders to have some say in it, and so it would be part of the engagement. Some of it is moreover, restoring the level of staffing that certain regulatory actors within the government of Alberta used to have. That's pretty easily costed. But this is really something where we need to engage a little bit more with stakeholders, and you can bet that there will be a clear costing as we go forward. But in the meantime, it's a matter of checking out sort of the level of investment that you're seeing in places like Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and using that as a good starting point.
All right, we'll go to our next caller, which is Alex McQuigg from the Western Producer. Go ahead, Alex. Your line is open.
Thanks for taking my question. On that local incentive program, I'm just wondering how that would work with the federal provincial agricultural policy framework. Is that in addition to that, or would you look at using those federal funds as part of this Agri-Food incentive program?
Well, I think that the starting point would be for us to, again, sit down with those local producers and have them tell us where the gaps are in terms of the support that they're getting through the federal program and the support that they still need. Generally speaking, what we're talking about in this portion of the paper is things that the government can do to grow the domestic market for local food production. And so that can take a number of different forms. And obviously it can grow by promoting it, but it can also grow by supporting platforms and enhancing access to those platforms. And so what we would want to do is, again, engage with those local smaller producers who are looking at maximizing the domestic market as opposed to sort of the more mass export and more mass distribution. So is a little bit of a work in progress there, but what we are saying is that we're going to work very intentionally with those smaller producers to help get them the regulatory support they need, as well as helping them build their domestic market.
Do you have a follow-up, Alex?
Yeah, just a quick one regarding irrigation and funding irrigation. I guess the South Saskatchewan River and Milk River, most of the Southern Alberta river systems that are on irrigation are currently under a moratorium. There's been increased efficiencies built into the system, which have helped promote water savings. But I guess my question is, would you look at expanding irrigation to other river systems such as the Red Deer River, which currently I don't believe has any irrigation systems on it?
I will have to say, Alex, that is a policy question for which I do not currently have the answer. Again, what we're focused on mostly is how to build up agri-food processing and value add. If we have folks come to us and identify those issues, then of course we'll need to engage. As you know, water use is a very complex area. We have the land use frameworks. We have multiple processes we have to go through there. So that's a little bit outside the scope of this paper, but certainly we invite and welcome stakeholders to come and talk to us about those issues, and we are very excited. We've got about 150 folks coming out to meet with us later this afternoon to talk about this paper as well as other issues, and certainly if that's a key element, we look forward to hearing from them then.
All right, we'll go to our next question, which comes from Catherine Kurgowski from Alberta Today. Go ahead, Catherine, your line is open.
Thanks for taking my question. So when you're talking about bringing on more staff to speed up the processing of agriculture and agri-food proposals, can you give me sort of a sense of what type of projects are getting held up in the queue and what sort of wait times are being faced by these producers?
Well, I'll tell you something, Catherine. What we've heard from folks is that from the very smallest producer trying to get approval for the most simple of changes in the way they do their work, all the way to the major industrial upgrader that wants to build a plant, across the board, they are coming up against multiple regulatory roadblocks. And it's not necessarily about the regulations being good or bad. It's about the fact that specifically under this UCP government, regulatory resources have been starved and reduced. And so there just is not the capacity to efficiently, effectively, expertly consider applications for development across the various departments that are impacted. And so what we need to do is sort of reconsider that. I mean, the AER, for example, it's got its bugs and it's got its issues, and that's a different conversation. But it was created in order to provide sort of an expert, streamlined doorway for energy investors to have their projects considered. Agricultural investors don't have the benefit of that same kind of cross-ministry work, and so they are left to navigate multiple ministries with multiple different approval processes, and almost all of whom are ridiculously short-staffed, and so matters just sit on people's desk. And it's not malevolent. It's not that the standards that are being enforced are somehow the wrong standards. It's that government has been starved of the resources to do its job well. And we have heard from countless investors, entrepreneurs, and small producers and everything in between, that when you look at the regulatory processes that Manitoba and Saskatchewan are able to put in place to their incoming investors, it's night and day between what's happened in Alberta. Because our government has historically focused so much on the energy sector, we haven't given the same kind of attention to our ag sector. And so this is about recreating the same kind of high-level expert regulatory talent and infrastructure to be able to speed up the process with quality and assurance that can make sure that all Albertans are confident in the quality of the decision making that is being that's being made.
Do you have a follow-up, Catherine?
A total off-topic non sequitur on Council of the Federation. The federal intergovernmental minister is saying, "Hey, we're not looking at increasing the Canada Health Transfer. You already got tax points and other injections of cash. The premiers are begging to get the federal government to the table." What do you think needs to happen with the Canada Health Transfers?
Well, first of all, there's two things. I think that there is definitely a role for the federal government to do much better on healthcare. But I will also say that the biggest challenges that we are facing right now as Albertans in our healthcare sector are not as a result of this 10-year-long failure of the federal government to step up. They are a result of the very directed, aggressive attacks on our healthcare system that we have seen from this UCP government over the last 3 years. So, first off, before we start talking about what we need from the federal government, Alberta needs to get its own house in order, and we need to stop attacking the very healthcare system that they are now pretending to the federal government they care about. Now, secondly, when it comes to those federal transfers, though, I will say the tax point transfer is not enough to make up for the systemic and necessary pressures which all provinces are experiencing when it comes to providing the kind of high-level, effective health care that all citizens of this country expect and want to see. Secondly, I will say that the federal government's episodic granting of money as opposed to adopting an annualized funding formula that provinces can count on is simply not good enough. And third, we know as a result of COVID that the pressures have gone up considerably and that the federal government needs to exercise its ability to raise the bar across the country and ensure that all Canadians can enjoy that a better healthcare system. So, federal government has to do better. But let me just stay at the starting point. The government of Alberta needs to get its own house in order, and they need to reverse pretty much every decision they've taken on healthcare since they've been elected.
All right, we'll do one more pass for questions. Just a reminder, star 9 on the phones and raise hand if you're joining us on Zoom. And with no further questions, we'll wrap today. Thanks, folks.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.